Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Physician's Mind podcast. I'm your host, Curtis Wilkerson, and today I'm honored to have guest Cirus Shiran on the show. Cyrus is a third-year medical student at the Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine, and he received a Bachelor's of Science in Human Biology, also from Michigan State University. He's now successfully passed both USMLE and COMLEX 1, and he's interested in specializing in neurology. If you enjoyed this episode, please share on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Enjoy the show. So Cyrus, thank you for coming on the show today. How you doing?
Absolutely. I'm well. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you just tell us a little about yourself? Where are you from and what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah. So right now, I am a clerkship medical student at Garden City Hospital, and my medical school is MSU Com, and I am from MSU as well for undergrad. So lifelong Spartan, you could say. Um, yeah, I'm also a Michigander, born and raised here. Parents are Persian, but I am both American and Persian. So that's my little origin story.
Interesting. And go Spartans, my friend.
Go green.
Go white. So what piqued your interest in a medical career?
Well, that's a very good question. Medicine is this very unique profession in that you have elements of research, teaching, clinical interaction, and you get this very unique role because of these three elements. There really isn't an art profession that has those. And throughout my undergraduate and even high school experiences, I really enjoyed these. So AP Bio was my favorite class in high school. In undergraduate, I worked as a learning assistant for a physics class, which between you and I was my worst section of the MCAT. So hopefully I didn't teach those kids anything too incorrect. But yeah, and medicine is just that perfect mixture of teaching, research, clinical work. And yeah, I'm very grateful to be in MSU. I love MSU. My family is all from the area, so it was an obvious choice for medical school as well.
Awesome. And you successfully passed USMLE and COMLEX on your first attempt.
Yes, sir. It was definitely it was one of the challenges of medical school. It's something else. It's a lot like the MCAT. I'm assuming you went through that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's definitely a lot like the MCAT, but what's different about boards are the content is a lot more medically focused. The MCAT's a lot more of a critical thinking test. You do learn a lot of sciences, of course, but you have like cars, for instance. And that section, you don't really need to bring so much information into it, but you have to understand how to think and reason. With boards, you need to have a lot of information, and then using that information, you got to think and reason. And so there's a higher level of complexity that makes it difficult. But I think medical schools do a very good job at training you how to succeed on board exams. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And typically, as an osteopathic student, I'm sure you're familiar with this. DO students only take the COMLEX exams if, depending on what they're interested in specializing in. And given that you've taken both, that leads me to think that you may be interested in perhaps a competitive specialty or you're not quite sure. But I want to ask, what are you interested in specializing in? Do you know?
oh yeah, that's a very good point. I think every DO student has this moment where they ask themselves, do I take one or two board exams? And it's a very interesting question. To answer your question, I'm hoping to become a neurologist. Of course, I haven't done all my clinical rotations yet, so that may change. But as of right now, I really do like neurology. And as for do I need both board exams for neurology? I would say it's somewhat program dependent. Michigan has historically been a very osteopathically friendly state. MSU Com has a lot of affiliate programs and they like our students. But at the same time, there are a lot of MD programs who aren't familiar with Comlex. They don't often take too many DOs. So for those program directors, having USMLE helps because when they're looking at their students, they can say, okay, well, they all took USMLE, so I have something to compare them to. I have a baseline I can use. So that's kind of the logic behind that.
Did you have any particular experience throughout your life that led you to be interested in neurology, or is it just because you like the specialty as it is?
Well, it is a cool specialty, but before medical school, I worked as a medical scribe, and I just happened to work for a neurologist. And I just thought it was really cool. What people don't, I think, know as much about neurology is that it is very versatile. It's a lot like internal medicine in that regards. The life of a EMG neuromuscular neurologist is very different from a stroke neurologist, right? You have completely different practice environments. There's so much you can do to tailor your practice of neurology how you like it. You can go and not see patients. You could do teleneuro, you can do interoperative monitoring, all that stuff. Or you could be a movement disorders neurologist and be very patient focused, very physical exam focused. And that kind of flexibility with just material that is very fascinating and uh, inspiring, really, to learn about, made it appeal to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to rewind a little bit back to the first and second years, given that you're now a third year student preparing to take your or preparing to embark on your clinical rotations. You mentioned that the step exams were some of the most challenging aspects of your first and second years, and I want to touch on that experience more in a little bit. But I want to also ask, were there any other experiences you found particularly challenging in those first couple years? And if so, could you share how you overcame those challenges?
Absolutely. Real quick, how far are you in your medical career? Because I know you're a fellow Spartan.
So as of now, I anticipate starting next July, July of 25. So I'm incoming and I'm going to start in about 10 months.
All right, well, in 10 months, you can look forward to a class known as gross anatomy. And I think there are two kinds of medical students. Future surgeons, and you'll recognize them with, walking up to you with some organ and saying, "Oh, look what I found. This patient had X, Y, and Z procedure. You could see the scars." And then you have other kinds of medical students who are like me, who are like, "Wow, I did not want to see that." So gross anatomy was a very difficult class for me, in part because how it was structured. We had written exams, which I've been trained to do that since undergrad, we all have, but we had practical exams. And the way it worked is if there was a cadaver, they displayed the organ, you had 50 seconds, identify whatever they wanted you to point to, or if they're trying to be challenging, they would say, what nerve innervates this organ? Or what artery provides blood to this organ? And then you had to move on. You couldn't go back. And for me, the way my mind works is that was not a good format. I like to say, okay, this is tough. I'm going to flag it, come back to it, move on, be efficient with my time. Right? That's how I approach all my multiple choice questions. So for me, that class was very difficult. I would argue it was the most difficult class in all of medical school. Like microbiology, no problem. I enjoyed that class. It was cool. Neurology, all the other clinical science, I thought they were not as difficult as anatomy because it was a very difficult class. So, to your question, how did I pass the class? I guess it took being open-minded. You had to change the way you approach studying, right? I took the first exam. I took it like I took an exam in undergraduate. Did not go as well as I wanted. Second exam, I tried to fix my method of studying. Also didn't go the way I wanted. So by the third exam, I really branched out. I asked my friends what they were doing, went to Open Lab more, realized a lot of these resources, online medical, there's like a textbook of anatomy online. U of M actually has a really nice dissections page. Basically, I needed time to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then by the third and fourth exams, I was doing well enough to pass the class, and things went up from there. So that was probably the most difficult non-boards class. And at some points, I'd argue that anatomy rivaled board exams in difficulty at some points, just because I really didn't jive well with the way they tested us in that class.
That's interesting, and it seems that everybody who starts med school has their own unique battles within the curriculum. In fact, I just was speaking with a resident now, but his undergraduate degree was in biochemistry, and he failed his first biochemistry exam in med school. So it just goes to show you that anything can come up and prove uniquely challenging. But in your case, you seem
Mhm.
to have adapted pretty well and you overcame it, which is fantastic.
Yes. One thing you'll notice is everyone's kind of good at something. And when meet people, your fellow medical students, hopefully you'll find a group environment where you guys can complement each other. So one of my good friends, she's my pod mate and future surgeon, I would imagine. She was very skilled as anatomy. The student I told you about, the one who presents the organ to you and says, "Look at this," that was her. So she really helped me and my other friends out. She would guide us through the cadavers. She was a pro section lab student. And then you'll find out is you kind of have your own skills and you can help your friends as well. So I was always like the Anki guy. I was making Anki cards. If someone in your audience doesn't know, Anki is like a spaced repetition software, and it's a really nice way to study in medical school. But anyways, I was one of the guys that would make Anki cards for my pod, find these resources. That's what I did. And then our other friend, he was really good at the hands-on thing. So he was just like, he's really good at intubating thing. When we did our intubation lab, everyone joked, if one of us needs someone to intubate, we're going to call Jacob. He's going to intubate for us. So you'll find that everyone's kind of good at something and you'll complement each other and you'll work together. And it's a really nice system in that way.
So you would say that having a team or a big group of friends would be highly beneficial for someone that's entering medical school?
Yeah, absolutely. MSU.com does this thing where they have a pod system. So they pair you with 3 or 4 medical students and you work with them for all of the pre-clerkship curriculum. Some people really got along well with their pods. I was fortunate that my pod was wonderful. I love them all. We got along well. Other people didn't so much, but that's okay. They found other friends and they created their own study groups. But yeah, I think that's really helpful.
So they just put you guys together randomly, or do you fill out a survey beforehand?
Random, pure chance.
Wow.
Yeah. There's always a little bit of drama when you get into dermatology because you have to create groups. So now you get a choice. Anyone's wondering, okay, is the pod going to stay together or are we going to go our own ways?
Oh, that's
So,
funny. That reminds me of like
mhm.
elementary school when you're making groups and you just hope that you get with your friend and not some random person.
Yep. No, in a lot of ways, it's somewhat like high school. Because undergrad, it's like I have 3 classes this week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a recitation. In medical school, you see the same people essentially 9 to 5 almost, right?
Hmm.
And it's like high school. You have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 to 5, evening lab. So you almost have that kind of level of close-knit relationships and companionship, which is really nice because even in projects where you don't get your pod, for the most part, any of my colleagues I could work well with because everyone there's really like-minded. They all come into medicine with, passions and interests, and it's a good group of people. It's a really nice cohort of people, and working with them is just a wonderful part of the experience, really.
So it's probably advantageous for an individual to kind of lay low and try their best to get along with everybody and almost be a little non-confrontational because you're going to be seeing everybody every day for 2 years.
Yes, yes. Try to avoid drama with your fellow medical students. That's my advice. Just personal advice. They're going to be your colleagues. They may refer their patients to you. You may refer patients to them. Try to keep it professional and, courteous, be courteous to them and all that good stuff, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. So your step exams, those are like 8-hour exams, right?
So like that, yeah.
I mean,
S-
that just sounds outrageous at first glance. How do you break that down, and what was your process for studying for such a challenging test?
Absolutely. The best advice I could give you is I don't know who said it, but it's practice as you play. So early in your training process, I recommend doing timed questions. Try to spend about a minute and a half per practice question. There are a lot of question banks you can use, UWorld, TrueLearn, Amboss, etc. You'll learn about those soon enough. And that's the first step. Just get used to answering a board style question in about a minute and a half, right? Be gracious to yourself because, some questions are going to be easier and they're going to save you time. Some are going to be harder, but start that way. And then as you start doing blocks, these would be 40 questions or 43 for complex. Make sure it's timed. I don't think there's too much merit in going through it on time bank when you're in dedicated. You should try to do it timed. So all this is when you get closer to the exams, you're kind of used to the timing. Then the last thing you really need to work on is stamina. Like you said, it's 7.5 hours for the USMLE, that's the MD exam, and then about 8 hours for complex. And so you want to kind of figure out what works for you. So to your point, I did feel the fatigue. I did my first few blocks. I was doing good, and then the other blocks came, and it's like, okay. this is getting to be a lot, and I'm burning out. So I brought coffee with me. And as I was doing my practice tests during my lunch break, I'd drink some coffee. And on test day, actually, I had coffee, I had wrist splints because, a lot of clicking, it actually starts hurting your wrist. I had ibuprofen in my bag. I had energy. I got protein bars, a whole bunch of stuff, right? I had all the everything I needed. And then as I would practice, I would realize I would need them. So I was doing these full length exams and I'm like, okay, I have a headache. All right, ibuprofen is going to be very helpful to have at lunch. So I put it in my bag. Coffee at lunch. I need a protein bar. Oh no, this food, it makes me hungry afterwards. It doesn't give me enough energy, that kind of thing. So practice, practice, practice. You have a lot of time and dedicated to not only learn how to solve the exam questions, but how do I take the test? How do I survive the 8 hours? And you'll get there. Most people do. It's if you give it time, you'll get there.
That's
Definitely.
hardcore.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot like the MCAT though, right? If I imagine your audience is a mix of pre-meds, medical students, and so on. So if you take into MCAT outside of COVID, my MCAT was COVID, so it was a bit weird, but outside of COVID, you'll find it's a lot like the MCAT. I think that's one of the reasons why the MCAT is so monstrous. They design it to kind of be like, okay, are you gonna be able to take a step exam? And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like every challenge that you face throughout the medical career, from undergraduate to residency and beyond, you're just preparing for that next step. That's why I love the
Yeah.
comparison of the medical journey to that of a mountain. And it's like, how do you climb a mountain? Well, you take it one step at a time. And practicing like you play reminds me of back in the day when I took my MCAT. And I'm not sure if you did this same procedure, but I would eat the same dinner the night before, steak and eggs. I would eat the same breakfast the morning of. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was eggs, bacon, and some potatoes. I would wear the exact same outfit. I would listen to the same music in the car, and I would eat the same snacks throughout the test. And truthfully, when it came to the actual test day, it really did just feel like another practice exam. So I enjoy how you said practice like you play because it's true. I've found it true in my life, and I'm sure you've had similar aspects in your preparation.
Absolutely. There's a playlist on YouTube. It's called, I think it's 80s workout music. And you got like the dude from Rocky and all that. I play that every morning. It was, yeah. My dad would walk by. He's like, "What are you listening to?" Because 80s is not my generation, but Eye of the Tiger, You Got the Touch, motivational. It worked. Uh, definitely, though. Yeah, I agree. Motivational music. That was really awesome too.
That is so sick. Yeah, mine was Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin and
Hmm.
what was the other one? It was Imagine Dragons. It was the I don't know how it goes, but it's a similar
Believer.
theme. It was like the path to heaven runs through miles of clouded hell. I don't know what it's called.
Dragons are good. I like them. There was the one from the Karate Kid I really liked. What was it? No, it wasn't The Touch. You're the best around. Da 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 da. That one. That one
Oh
was
yeah.
really good.
Nice.
Mhm.
Man, that's so funny. It's true though, I'm sure it's relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
No, be goofy and do what works for you. If waking up to the Karate Kid helps you get pumped, do it, man.
well, those tests, I like to imagine them as a fight. It's like a battle. I mean, you get up and you
It
prepare to fight.
it is, yeah, definitely. And know that to use your analogy, there are some battles you will lose. Not every score on my practice exams were good ones. I think that's normal. But even after doing my dedicated studying, took my first few exams weeks off, and it wasn't even a passing score. So it's scary, but you really got to give yourself grace and realize this is your first time taking a full length exam. Breathe, you'll be okay. Because I don't think I'm the only person, but my first full length was not a good score. Uh, it really shook me. And again, as a DO, I only have to take the complex exam to get my license. So it also made me be like, oh, maybe I can't take this as exam. Maybe I'm not skilled enough to compete with all these other people. I should just drop it. So definitely give yourself grace and know your first exam may not go the way you want. But the key thing is, can you get back up and learn from what went wrong? That's really what I think it's the key to being successful. Learning from what you did wrong and being able to identify what went wrong.
Well said. Well said. It's like a fight. You never give up. You learn from your mistakes, you adapt, and then you overcome, if you will.
Exactly.
But yeah, and you mentioned some of those first practice exams you took weren't passing scores, and I'm sure that's extremely relatable, of course. And in my experience, again, only with the MCAT, I think I was 3 weeks out and I got a 499. And for those who aren't familiar with those metrics, I think that's below the average. It's like below the 50. It's a terrible score, frankly.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's this thing. Pre-meds are put through a meat grinder, dude, because that's like roughly, if I remember correctly, that's about 50th%. So you did better than like half the people who took it. But I get where you're coming from. That's lower than the average for most medical schools. So it's a meat grinder though. Like, don't feel bad if you get a 499 on MCAT, because again, that's roughly 50th percentile for all the people who prepared diligently to take that exam.
that's true. And that's a good point. I suppose I should have phrased it as having been preparing for so many months and receiving some higher scores previously. A
Yeah.
499 3 weeks prior was like a big slap in the face. And
No,
point
I
is,
totally get it. Yeah. You want that, what was it? It's like 510 plus was the golden standard back when I was doing it. And so everyone was like, I want to get that score. And it's really disheartening when you don't get there, especially after working so hard. So I totally get it.
exactly. And like you said, you've just got to persevere. And
Exactly.
that's the key.
Mhm.
So now what are you most excited for moving into your clinical years now that you're done with the
Mm.
preclinical section of med school?
Yes. Okay. So I'm in my first rotation right now, psychiatry. And it's a very interesting case. We had someone coming in with pain, specifically talking about shoulder pain. And my first instinct was, oh wow, I want to do an exam. Because you probably learned this once you go through, especially DO school. You learn a lot of really cool physical exam skills. You really learn how to do this stuff. And one of the biggest disappointing things was like, oh yeah, we didn't do the physical exam. Because in psychiatry, the doctor-patient relationship is a bit different than other medical specialties. And so you don't always jump to a physical exam. In a lot of cases, it may not even be professional to do so. But what I'm excited for is to be out there in my internal medicine rotations, because the way they handle it at Garden City Hospital is you get assigned your own patient and you go in there, you do a physical exam, you interview them, you write a treatment plan, and you write a progress note. And then the attending and residents will look through it, obviously, but that actually goes into the medical record. So you actually go in there, do a physics exam, and say, hey, this patient had crepitus when I extended and flexed their elbow. You put that down. Resident's going to check it. So yeah, and that's going to go into the electronic medical record. So for the first time in my medical career, I'm actually contributing to patient care outside of a tested environment. And I'm excited for that. Some rotations obviously are different, and you won't get to do that. You might really just be shadowing, or physician would say, "Hey, Cyrus, what drug would you give for this?" Or what do you think this diagnosis is? And that's great too. It's helpful, but the times where you get that level of autonomy and, oh wow, I'm actually contributing to patient care. It's a really exciting feeling, and I'm looking forward to that personally.
Yeah, because it seems like in those first couple of years, you can go quite a long time without experiencing a sense of progress or reward for your effort. It's just a begrudging sequence of labor day after day. But once you finally get to that point, you're like, okay, there's a tangible aspect of my work now that I can sense. So that's good. Good for you, finally making it to that point and getting ready to rock.
Yeah, excited. It's not. I mean, it's interesting. It's medicine is always fascinating. The body is really cool, and seeing what it does wrong is very fascinating from like an intellectual point of view. But at some point, you want to go in there and use those skills, right? There's a reason you're becoming a physician and a PhD. It's because you want to go into clinics. That's the way I feel a lot of times. So definitely looking forward to that.
Absolutely. So you're interested in neurology. Does that residency first start with internal medicine and then a fellowship, or how would that look?
Yeah, so neurology is very interesting. In most cases, cardiology, GI, medicine ward type fields would start with internal medicine and you do a fellowship. Neurology itself, though, is a separate specialty, much like psychiatry. So a typical neurologist may do 1 year as an intern. They'll do a medical year, and then they do 3 years of neurology residency. After that, you pass your American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology boards, and you become a general neurologist. You can choose to practice or do fellowship. And again, much like internal medicine, the neurology fellowship is what kind of defines, if you choose to do one, how you will be practicing and what skills you pick up.
Okay. Yeah, so again, a long road and you're in the gym right now. You're practicing for that fight.
Yeah. It gets better though, in my opinion. As you keep climbing the ladder, it's very tough because first, getting it, that's very tough. You got to compete with all these people. But then once you get in, it's less so I'm competing everyone to get in. It's more so I want to match a specialty. It may not be the specialty I want, but odds are if you go to a reputable medical school, MSU is a phenomenal one, you'll match. And so and then once you start residency, you very unlikely, assuming you don't do anything foolish, you won't become a doctor. So as you climb the ladder, it's less and less, oh, will I make it? And more, how much longer till I get there?
Yeah, well said. And even in those times where you're battling to compete and you're just doing the best you can, there's purpose and joy to be found in that, the climb in the journey. Of course, as I'm sure you're familiar, along with many of the listeners, it's not always about that destination, but truthfully, it's about the journey that it takes to get there. And there's no shortage of setbacks and challenges and adversity that you'll have to face, but that's where the meaning and the individual purpose can be derived from. So, and yes, once you get further along in the journey, it may become a little more relaxed given that you're not competing, but all of that is part of the journey. So it's an interesting point to bring up there.
No, exactly right. Enjoy the little steps. The first time you hear a murmur, like, oh, what is this? Why doesn't the heart sound normally? And being able to, and I'm still not all that good at this myself, but being able to listen to a heart and be like, that's a murmur, that's normal. It's really cool, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor one day, and now you're picking up skills. Being able to hit someone's biceps brachii reflex and get the uh +2 out of 4 reflex, right? That's really cool. It's wow. Look at how far I've come. So enjoy the little steps, enjoy the little accomplishments and what you learn along the way. Definitely.
That is cool. That is cool. So as we wrap up here, I want to ask you one final question, and that is, do you have any insights or advice that you think would be valuable to share to anybody who is perhaps an undergraduate student, a current medical student that you think would be good for them to hear?
Absolutely. I talked a little bit about boards and pre-clerkship. I want to give you a piece of advice for clerkship. And it's something on my first day the resident talked to me about. And it's advocate for yourself. That's probably the most important piece of advice I could give you. It's always a weird feeling being a clerkship medical student on the team, right? You're not a doctor yet, you don't have a license, and you really don't have patient care responsibilities, more so you do work for the residents or the attendings, right? But at the same time, advocate for yourself. You are part of the team and you are supposed to be there. So go to the resident and say, hey, can I see this case with you? Go to your attending. Can you show me this? I'm looking for this. Always, always, always. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and don't feel like you don't belong. Because I've gotten that feeling a few times. It's just things are so busy, sometimes they forget the medical students there. But don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and know that you belong there. Your school sends you there, and it's because you've worked so hard to get to that point that you are there. So go in there, smile on your face, and introduce yourself. I'm interested in this. I'd like to see this. If you see this, can you point it out to me? Whatever your interests are, now is the time to explore them because third year and fourth year of medical school is where you have the flexibility to explore your interests. Once you get into residency, you're kind of locked into that specialty. So explore your interests, advocate for yourself, and enjoy the experience.
That's great advice. Advocate for yourself. Understand that that's part of your experience and it's the first time you'll be able to explore. And it seems like you've kind of touched on a good point of advice, which I've heard a little bit before too, in regards to just it's a fine balance. You don't want to go in with arrogance by any means, and you don't want to go in being so meek that you just appear useless. You want to find that fine line of I'm well prepared. I understand what I'm getting myself into, but I also understand that I'm at the bottom of the totem pole and act accordingly. So, Cyrus, that's fantastic advice. Thanks a lot for sharing.
Absolutely. Just ask if you're ever unsure. The attendings and residents, they're most of them are really kind. Just ask, what do you feel comfortable with me doing? And once you go there for a few visits, you'll understand where they are at and where you can explore and do things.
Excellent. Okay, folks. So today we've had the opportunity to talk with Cirus Shiran. Cyrus, thank you so much for sharing your insights and being a part of the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Curtis. I really enjoyed this experience.